Base camp's an amazing space to be in. It's really colourful. There's lots of prayer flags, loads and loads of tents, and there's a real buzz about it during the climbing season, because Everest Base Camp, as we know it as a camp, is only up during the April-May climbing season. So yes, there are a lot of humans there. There are a certain number of permits sold each year, and then adding to the climbers, you have the climbing Sherpas and all of the support staff that go with that. So there's probably around 1,000 people on base camp every year, give or take a few. But yeah, it's an incredible place, but you're always very aware of the environment you're in and what you're actually going to climb as well.
So Jo, you were there as recently as a month ago. What noticeable changes have there been over the years that you've been there?
I mean, yes, there definitely have been changes. We all know climate change is happening, and I believe the scientists have told us that the glacier is lowering, the lower section, due to global warming and the sun heating up. I definitely noticed a slight change in weather this year, especially having not been out for a couple of years due to the pandemic. And my Sherpa guides were telling me that there are definitely changes in the weather and the sort of more general weather patterns. But I think that there's always a lot of focus on Everest and how it's impacting climate change, but it's obviously a global phenomenon, global thing. There, towards the end of the climbing season, which is when I went out, there's always going to be less ice, but it doesn't mean to say it's disappeared, because we're getting towards the summer months in Nepal as well. So there are always changes going on, but it is starting to be noticeable for sure.
And with the glacier melting at such a rate, what dangers does this pose for you as climbers?
Well, there's not only do you have ice blocks, seracs, they are called, but you also have big boulders which are on top of ice. So underneath the boulders are ice which starts to melt. And then these can become very unstable. This has been happening for generations, but I think what we're seeing now is a slight increase in the speed that all of this melting is happening. So things are starting to become a little bit more unstable. Maybe there's a bit more rockfall than there was before, maybe a few more avalanches than there were before. I know this year the mountain was much drier, and by that I mean there was not as much snow cover, specifically around when climbers are summiting as well. And also this year they had a very prolonged period, and when I say prolonged, it's a couple of weeks, 10 days, a couple of weeks of stable weather, where there are plenty of days which are safe enough for climbers to go up, and that's becoming more of a rare thing. So it was it was quite interesting to watch it from the sidelines this year, from being at base camp and also on other mountains around.
And Jo, did you notice if the waste issue was a significant problem there? How was it managed?
So in years gone by, and decades gone by, there was a lot of old climbing gear and human waste left on the mountain. But as mountaineers, we want to protect the environment we're in. In 2014, when there was the big avalanche at Everest in the Khumbu icefall, then nothing could be retrieved from higher up, so it overwintered out, so all the tents and everything overwintered out. And that's the same that happened in 2015 after the earthquake. So what people see now is probably the throwback from that. Climbers are very aware, like I said, that we want to protect the environment we're in for future generations. And many more companies are much more focused on taking out what they also bring in. There's a bond that you need to pay in order for that to happen as well. And also, as I'm sure you've heard of, Nims Purja has the Nims Dai Foundation, and he has a big task of cleaning up Everest and the surrounding mountains to put right what past generations have done.
A new base camp is expected to be established at a lower altitude. Is this a good idea in your view?
It's going to be a challenge on many aspects, just from the sheer size of it. So the Khumbu Glacier, where Everest Base Camp is at the moment, is about 2 kilometres long. So everybody is stretched out. There's space in between, which is a good thing. Everyone has a bit of privacy. Whereas if it's moved off the glacier and further down to a slightly lower altitude, there is just not as much space. So many people will be in sort of little pockets of flatter ground. It also means that those that have to go lower down have a harder time climbing back up or trekking back up to the original base camp to then go up through the Khumbu icefall. And that will have an impact on climbers' itineraries and also sort of general fitness and acclimatization as well, because if you come lower, it means the actual altitude you climb is going to be greater. So that's going to have an impact. So it'll be interesting to see how it is managed, if it does actually happen.
And finally, do you think to help preserve the environment, the number of Everest climbers allowed each year, does that need to be further restricted, or what other measures need to be in place, do you think?
Well, it's interesting because it was mooted a few years ago that they were going to put in place a permit system, and we weren't sure how this was actually going to be policed or actually managed. Who gets the opportunity to climb and who doesn't, which is a really interesting aspect of it. In the grand scheme of things, it's not a huge number of people compared to other mountains throughout the world. But I think because it's such a direct number of people in a short space of time over the couple of months during the climbing season, I'm not sure how that would be managed. It would be very difficult. And I think it might have to be a watch this space. I know other countries have put in permits, but I don't think I'm not sure that the numbers are ever going to grow to a substantial amount that it would need to be done. So we'll see. We'll watch this space.
We'll be watching indeed. Jo Bradshaw, good to talk. Thank you.
My pleasure.